The 5 meetings you must have before you plan your next big event. We'll get to that in a moment, but want to let you know that we have a PDF that you can download in the description of this episode or the show notes that goes through everything we talk about, all the notes, all the mood boards, everything visual on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see that in the bottom corner, but I know it might be easier if you want to look at it on your own laptop or your own phone. And so make sure to get that before listening to this episode or afterwards to take a look at all the notes that we discussed. But with that, now into the episode, 5 meetings you must have to plan your big events. Well, Maddie, Annie, welcome to Talking Church.
Yo.
I can't believe it's taken you this long to have you both on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
I think we've probably talked about you on the podcast before.
That's funny.
So for those who don't know, is there a box elder bug?
Where?
I see it
Where?
in
Oh my
the
gosh,
reflection.
it's on the
Literally
glass.
on the glass.
Ready?
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
There's a.
No.
I saw the reflection. Sorry, bug.
Oh, wow.
I saw the reflection in the glass. Holy
Ew.
cow!
Did it look giant?
It looked giant.
Mega bug.
Yeah, this studio is apparently home to bugs. But anyways,
see it.
maybe explain your roles. And
Yeah.
then obviously we have laptops, we have papers, we have iPads here. And for those who are listening, I do encourage you to go watch this episode. This is, again, it's a good one to listen to, but it probably would be more beneficial to watch it because there's a lot of visuals that we've never done before and we're going to see how it works. So anyways, Annie, why don't you start? What is your role here? And then Maddie.
Yeah. My name's Annie Judd. I'm the art director here at River Valley. So I lead one of the 5 departments of the creative team. So I oversee the designers, which is super, super fun. So we do a lot of, obviously all the design. So anything digital, anything print. My role specifically, I do a lot of creative vision kickoff, which is really fun. So for any event, any initiative, any campaign, any rebrand, I work with our creative director, Aaron Johnson, to make sure that we set up the rest of the creative team and a vision for where we're going. And then I work with the designers to make sure that things get shaped and things get sent off. So more of a support to the creative team, but it's fun.
And you still design too?
I do a little bit of design still. I used to be previously, I've been here 5 years now, which is crazy. So I was a designer for 3 years and sort of still a designer until 2 months ago. So I'm still
Well, I called you a lead designer in one of our meetings, and you correct me very quickly. You said, "Logan, I'm the art director."
I literally don't want to be the lead designer anymore. Please let me have this job.
Apologies.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for apologizing. So I do still some design, but not nearly as much. It's a lot more of team leading kind of stuff, which is really fun.
Great.
So I love my job.
Yeah, super fun. I've been on the team for about 3.5 years now. My name is Maddie Bennett, also first time here. And I help Annie from a communications perspective. So my role is project management, specifically within global and house-wide events. So it's kind of a big term, but essentially all the events that all of our churches invited to participate, including River Valley Conference. That's also for network church attendees as well. And that entails everything from working with ministries that are here and then also outside vendors and kind of being the connecting point between both of them and then design as well. So
Yeah, and for many listening, some churches that maybe are larger than us have a number of people that are like you. Other churches that maybe are smaller, they say, okay, I do both of your roles and then some.
For sure.
And so, of course, contextualizing this, we're calling this episode, I don't know exactly what we titled it, but it's 5 meetings you must have in order to do an event or a creative initiative or something that has more than just a normal Sunday service. And I think there's a lot of people who we've talked to people in the network, they say, hey, I'm doing my first women's conference, or we're doing our first Easter that has a bigger brand to it, or we have a Kingdom Builders banquet that's coming up, or again, a number of things, albums. I mean, there's so many examples on what we could use this for, but we're going to dive into those 5 meetings, what those 5 meetings look like. And then, of course, depending on the size of the event, there may be more meetings. There may be some of these meetings could be combined in others, but it's really 5 concepts that we do whenever we're going into any creative initiative or creative event. So we'll be screen sharing and bouncing back and forth between our papers and our screens and the microphones.
That's gonna be great.
Annie, where do we start?
No, we love doing events at River Valley. We do so many. And so just to also encourage smaller churches, we have we're just kind of figuring it out. You know, it's there's no perfect way to do it. It's whatever works for your staff and your team. And so this has worked really well for us. So to kick off how we would launch any initiative. So we kind of have broken this up into starting with events, but really the cadence does apply to smaller events to Easter to Christmas. It's all kind of in there. So the first thing is vision meeting and then the brainstorm. So we've kind of combined them for like the purpose of this into like one. I do think you could do the meetings together if you extended it a little bit, if you had a longer meeting. We do them separate, but they kind of had the same principles. So the vision that's kind of where you want. Like, if you think about like what the purpose of these meetings are, the first is to like make sure the project moves along. Like that's just as like a normal thing that you have to keep up with deadlines. The other part though is to like keep unity among the staff, especially something I think we hear so often is a lot of creative teams rubbing against ministry teams. And for us, this cadence has been like a healing point and like really brought unity like from creative, like so that we're not our own island into like ministry events and helping us work together. Because it's not just creative's event and it's not just the ministry's event. And so the ministry, like for the vision meeting, they're kind of the ones that lead that first meeting. So vision is like truly just the vision. Like we want to hear the heart. We want to hear like, what are you like want for this event to be? Like we just had the conference one the other day, which is so fun. And so you came with like, here's the theme I'm thinking, here's the scriptures. And this is also—
I didn't actually have that much prepared. I think you taught more in that meeting. But
that's so funny. It was a team effort.
But
generally speaking, it would go.
Yeah, that's what you've done, I guess.
Yes. But I do think that one of the pain points we were finding was the people working on the event or initiative didn't hear the vision from the source. And then the gaps would be filled in. So it wasn't a long meeting. It was a pretty quick meeting, but it was, let's all get on the same page. So it was a lot of people, but it wasn't a lot of time of what are we trying to accomplish? Now, for some events that we do year after year, it's more what lane are we running in? But especially for a new event, hearing from the stakeholder of the ministry or most people, it's their lead pastor or their executive pastor or creative pastor, hearing from them, here's what we're trying to accomplish, then gets everyone on the same page instead of like, well, no, this is supposed to be the biggest, best event, most expensive thing ever. Well, that's not what I heard.
Totally. No, that's so true. And it's like clarity is kindness, you know, in that sense. And so the vision is really the time where it's like, this is like the kickoff, I guess, is like another way that you could call it. And so things though that are important for a ministry to bring into that meeting, it's like, the date's got to be locked in, the time's got to be locked in, the venue's got to be locked in, so that really it's like the ministry is saying like, hey, here's everything I have. I'm passing the baton to you so that you can do everything that you need to do now. So that's essentially what the vision is, which is so fun. It's like my favorite part to hear the heart. If you're doing Christmas or Easter and wondering like what a vision could look like in that kind of situation, our creative director is the one that brings the vision to those. So for ministry-led events, it's like the ministry stakeholder. For creative-led events, it's the creative director, which is super fun. So we start with the vision, and like you just said, it can be super short. Like some of them can go longer if you really like want to get into like more ideating, just on a looser stage.
It's usually where we end up because people get so excited about it that you just start brainstorming, which is fun.
Or it's like, I mean, we just talked through like ideas for like guest speakers and things like that. So it can be used as a space for like other things, so long as you get the heart. But if you keep it short, you can combine it with a brainstorm. And I love brainstorms so much. I live for brainstorms. They're usually led by, for sure, our creative director, and then I help kind of facilitate the actual brainstorm part. And so there's so many ways that you can do a brainstorm. Like there's so many ways. And so I like would encourage anyone that's like never done a brainstorm with their team to like just go Google like a bunch of ideas. Like there's so many options. Our like default that's like ended up working really well for us is we get giant Post-its and we go through and write out all the categories of, it's like, okay, so we need to brainstorm ideas for design and then for film and decor and marketing and then discipleship and next steps. Like you can really decide what you want the categories to be. The important thing is that it's like you have a timer set. We do like groups of 3 minutes per Post-it so that people can collaborate. I think collaboration is like also great for unity, especially we invite the ministries to the brainstorms. It's not just a creative brainstorm, it's an event brainstorm. And it's a good opportunity to like kind of mix up like who the people are and get some new ideas out there. My favorite thing is that no idea is a bad idea in that space. Later on, it may be a bad idea, but in that space, it's a good idea.
Anything goes.
The budget doesn't exist in brainstorming.
Yes. That was the second thing I was going to say. No budget. I just have found that it's like, one of the conference brainstorms, this is so memorable. I think this was my first conference brainstorm in like 2019, probably back in the day. And one of the guys was like, what if we had a giant fish tank in the middle of the lobby? And I just remember being like, what? That's like, why would you say that? But it was so fun because it's like later when we were analyzing the brainstorm notes, it was like, oh, we just want this to be a fun experience. Yeah. So that's a crazy idea, but it's easier to scale down.
We didn't
smaller
have a fish
ideas.
tank.
We did not do the fish tank. It actually ended up being COVID and it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
So recipes. But it's like easier to scale down.
Fish tank.
Dang it.
Yeah.
There was another crazy idea. That was a weird brainstorm. Anyways, but just the idea that it's like, it's easier to like scale something down and find like, what did I like about that idea versus like starts like, well, we have a tight budget, so we can't do anything. Yeah. Like your ideas are going to be so much more limited versus if the sky's the limit. Now it's important to know that the sky is not the limit after the brainstorm, you know, but that is kind of like, I think the best way to like facilitate really good ideas.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that the brainstorm, the way we do it, like you said, we set a timer. It's usually really fast, like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and you go from post-it to post-it, writing different things down. And by the end of it, you have so many ideas. You have way too many. Whereas I'd say before we did this process, we would do brainstorms, and it would be kind of the traditional brainstorm is you're sitting in a conference room and one person has a whiteboard marker and most people aren't talking and a few people have, usually it's one or two people that are sharing all the ideas.
Totally.
And you might leave with a few, but there's not a consensus. People kind of feel like I just wasted my time because I didn't even say anything. Yeah. And so in my experience, I found it to be very, very helpful. Yeah. From that point though, now you have a million ideas. Yeah. They're all on Post-it notes or giant Post-it notes. Yep. So Maddie, what happens from there to getting to the next step?
Yep. Awesome. So one thing too with the brainstorms that I want to say for my personality type, because we're opposite on this, is brainstorms are hard for me. Yeah. I'm on the working genius. Wonder and invention are like the bottom for me. And so I love brainstorms because they're challenging for me and they make me think creatively in a different way when they're led by a personality like Annie, who thrives in those wonder and invention traits. So just know if you're like, oh, that sounds so hard or so intimidating, like there's a space for you to create ideas in there too. So from the brainstorm, we end up taking all the ideas, they go into one giant doc, and then that doc is sent out as an option for everyone to see the full list and then go back through and like star the favorites. So at the end of the meeting, we'll spend some time all going back through together like, oh, that idea is great. Oh, that idea is great. And so then from there, all the different departments take the ideas and flesh them out a little bit more and then come back together with a pitch. So you can talk about the pitch a little bit if you'd like.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially it's like Maddie said, I'm clicking through here. Like this is an example of it's like 5 pages worth of notes and so different categories.
From the beginning, all the ideas. And then at the end of the meeting, we would have gone through and identified for each of those, like, for example, film and storytelling or stage and production, like which are the ones that are resonating with the whole room, specifically with that department. And then they'll explore those ideas a little bit further.
And I think it does show the importance of taking good notes. And usually there's somebody kind of assigned to be a note taker. Maddie, you do that quite a bit. But that way you go into next year and you think, well, what did last Easter?
Every time.
What did we say?
And we always have repeat ideas.
So great.
We always, I forget what it was for conference this year, but there's always something that like didn't happen the last year and someone brings it back again and we're like, okay, we're going to do it. So
I pitched a hanging acrylic display for about 4 years and then I finally let it go. So that's my first year not pitching it.
It happens.
Sorry.
It happens to the best of us. So obviously there's like a lot of notes here. So where we would go from here is that we would move into the creative pitches. And so we kind of, the way we operate is that we take all these notes and we come up with all these ideas together. So it's not just design coming up with design. Like everyone has ideas about different things. And so we start in a bigger group. And then at a certain point, it's like, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So you got to funnel it down to like your respective teams. So the comm team will go and take their ideas. Design will go and take ours. So like you said, taking notes is so critical for every meeting, starting from vision all the way through. We have a living doc. Like, so I just went through like our 2024 and we have every like meeting listed, which is great because then by the time I go through to the art direction pitch, the idea is that it's like you want to take all the vision, pull out what are the best ideas, at least for design. Sometimes I'll pitch someone else's idea, but I try not to step on people's toes. So I'm like trying to clean up that process. So the way we operate is that we'll start with an art direction pitch, which is like the brand, essentially.
So this is meeting 2 now.
Yes. So this is moving into number 2, which is I've kind of labeled it like art direction pitch / all creative pitch if you want to separate them. Or if you're a smaller team, I was the only designer for like so long. So it's like you can condense this if you have a small team. So the art direction pitch, we start with that because we have just found that the brand and the tone and feel of where we want to go is that impacts everything else. And like production and worship are like, well, a lot of my ideas reflect the branding, and a lot of like film feels the same. So we will kick off with an art direction pitch like, hey, does this overall theme feel good? Before I pitch it to the ministry, I will pitch it to the creative team to make sure they feel good. So that's something that's not listed in this like 5 must-have meetings is like internal reviews like
Super
are what
helpful.
carry us to these meetings. So if you got to meet as a creative team, if you got to meet with your manager or like whatever that looks like.
Yeah, there's stuff happening in between this, but I
Yes.
think that a lot of times people don't know where they're going next.
Yes,
and I
totally.
think this cadence is helpful because okay, if we have a timeline and
We have
let's say it's 3 months
Yes.
from,
Yep.
okay, we're
Yep.
starting planning Easter in February or whatever, and it's
Yep.
like we have 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is. Well, okay, we know how we got to fit these in.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Or if you have a year,
Yep.
it takes time and you're working on maybe your big anniversary celebration or a big conference that you're doing or something special with your youth ministry.
Yep.
It helps you to know it kind of sets the timelines for everything else.
Yes,
does,
totally.
for
It
sure.
does. And so we start with, it's like, okay, after brainstorm, we take a couple weeks and we mood board. So we don't even pitch a brand yet, just because we have found too, it's like, we want the ministry to feel like they're a part of the process too. And it's like, they are a part of the process. Like if you don't feel good about the brand I pitch for conference, then it's a wash because we're not unified as a team. So we start with the mood board. And then once the mood board is approved, we will go into the all creative pitch. And so there's certain things I personally love to have in a mood board just for like quick tips on pitches. Pitches can look so different. I will say that a lot of like events, also a lot of my mood boards look the same for like a ministry rebrand or like this can be scaled, So I have in here we're kind of like using Sparkle 2024, which we just had. Well, I say just had, it's like just the other day, like Pastor Rob says. That's kind of how I feel about it. We're using Sparkle as our example here. So I have a mood board and I'm not going to go through all of it, but I always start, it's like, if you're pitching, if you're the art director, if you're the creative director, if you're the designer, kind of filling in for both, whatever your role is, starting with the heart is the most important thing of it's like, the heart of what we do, the reason we have the vision and brainstorm is so that we can like intentionally build something that like creatively ministers, It's like, we don't want to make just cool art for cool art. We don't want to do cool films for cool films. Like, what is the spiritual like problem we're trying to solve?
For sure.
And like, how does this brand like solve that? And so that's kind of essentially what the pitch starts with. We do scripture. We'll go through a vision recap to make sure we're all on the same page. We have found that like keywords or like target, like we call them sometimes, is really helpful for like across the teams. Like for example, our seasonal rebrands that we do. If I send the keywords to our music producer for him to like make the bumper music, he's like, oh, I have this framework of what my music should sound like. Like maybe the visuals don't resonate, but this keywords list is like everything from start up until the day of the event should feel like these keywords essentially. So we do that. And then we have the theme. And then I go through my like main things are typography and like if you have like a specific logo situation, that kind of too. Color inspo, an actual palette. For this one, we had illustration style because that was just like what the brand is. So it can kind of start to vary. It's like if you have like imagery content that you want to use instead, like whatever your brand is, this is like pretty like level 1 design of like how to build a mood board, but just essentially,
To be fair, I would say level 1 design is something that people don't have time. Like a lot of people feel like I don't have time to put the
build
work
that out.
in. And I think what we're trying to share is not,
That's true.
hey, if you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour, you have to spend all this time doing this. I think what it more is this maybe can help you to stop running 1,000,000 miles an hour, to know that there's a process.
Yes.
For sure.
And also, I hope that there's people listening that aren't designers and aren't creative and art directors that say, when I say, hey, I need a graphic for Easter on Thursday.
Oh my gosh, my worst nightmare.
It's like, well, just throw it together. How hard can it be?
No.
Well, for people who are making that, like, and again, you can.
Yes.
But is it going to be the best work? Especially when we're talking about big holidays. And does it matter what our Easter graphic is? Does it matter what our Christmas graphic is in someone's salvation? Maybe not. But in the same way, if if we're trying to use the gifts that God has given us to be creative, and you say, our mailer is Comic Sans because we just threw it together, you know, it's like maybe the type of people that are going to be attracted to that are not, again, we're not giving it our best.
No, it's not.
I think
that's a nice way to say that.
Really good point though, because I think about too, like back to before we did this cadence, and the number of times we would run into situations like that where we're like, oh no, like we have to have this in 2 weeks, and because we, you know, we're running so fast, which isn't always a bad thing. Like we didn't even think about it yet, and so it really does create like a catch-all for you to like it's helping you create a system to follow, so that you don't end up in those positions where a designer has to make something in 2 weeks.
And then on the flip side of that, it gives you, oh no, I don't have to make that now. I can push that later.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know,
we
you're
do
not
that all
missing
the time.
the deadline.
We do that
My
all the time.
favorite thing is to push things out.
Yes,
personally.
she does. It's her favorite.
I am a timeline pusher. No, it's so true.
Speaking of timeline pushing, for the sake of time.
Yes.
Okay,
gotta
moving on.
Anyways,
Moving on. So those are just examples. Like there's a ton of different things that you could add to mood boards. And I will say, to your point, like you were saying, like I used to run so fast being the only designer, and this has been my template for I have an hour to make the sparkle mood board. Like that's insane. And this has been my like quick template of like how I get through things. And if you have time to build it out, you can. So after that, we move into the all creative pitch. Again, you could do this all together. For us, it works to be separate. I'm not going to go through all of it, but we'll do like an art direction recap. And then the main point of this is so that our comm, film, production, and worship team can pitch their ideas to the ministry. So it used to be really just like design pitching, but it's like same thing. Production would get to the end of the row and be like, does this even make sense like for the event? Like how are we like not unified in this? So it's a great way that if you have the team to be able to go through, like here's an example of like the comm team PDF. They included the ticket sales, ideas for social ads, like so things too, just to encourage. It's like even if you feel like you're not in a creative role, you still have things to pitch and you still have things that are creative in a different way to bring. So those are a couple examples. So once we get through then the art direction pitch and the all creative pitch, we really start to move into, it's like, okay, everyone start running now and like build out all your stuff. And so the following, which Maddie can talk more about because she runs them like a total pro, we have what's called creative check-ins and service planning that kind of happen in tandem as we're like actually building it out.
Yeah, for sure. So we put these in one category. You can do them separately together. We find that it's important it's mainly the same people in the room, so we often just group them together for time's sake anyways. But during the creative check-ins, all those same departments that had ideas during the all creative pitch are coming back and giving the ministry updates. So again, creating unity, creating a space where it's like we're solely coming together to talk about updates for this specific event, specific initiative, and then in doing so, you're creating deadlines for people by saying like, okay, we have a creative check-in in 2 weeks. Annie, I would love to have decor mock-ups to show the team in 2 weeks when we have a creative check-in again. So it creates built-in deadlines that help you kind of move along the process. And then we would have comm, design, worship, production, film, again, give updates during creative check-in. And then when we get to the service planning portion, we quite literally just pull up service planning in Planning Center and start to build out that framework. And we do that a lot earlier than you would think for events, just because without looking at it, you often get to the end and you're like, oh wait, we want to film in that one spot and we haven't talked about it. And so we service plan early. That's something that we haven't always done as well that I think we've started to do earlier, and that helps a lot. So Annie has the service order from one of the sparkles pulled up. That's from session 1 of this year. And I think it was originally finalized like 6 months before the event, just to be like, okay, this is actually what we want to include. And then from a creative standpoint, it allows worship, production, film to really be able to support all the sessions and what's happening during them. So,
and I think another thing that it might go without saying, but I think it's a good reminder, this is happening in conjunction with everything else we do. And so we might go from, okay, we're planning a service order meeting for Sparkle 6 months from now, and then you go to your final meeting for the youth conference that's happening.
That's exactly
and then
how
you
it
go
happens.
to then you go to pitch and preview for the weekend, and maybe there's a Kingdom Builders video that's happening that we're checking out. And then, oh, by the way, we have our brainstorm for conference. And so it's not like, maybe people who are part of the church are saying, so do you guys take a year long to get an event done? Well, no, this is happening a number of times. So there might be a day, like there have been days where you're like, okay, I'm in meeting 1 for Sparkle and meeting 5 for conference.
Yes.
And then I'm also running to Apple Valley to go preview the stuff on the screen, you know?
Totally.
So
it's crazy.
It's good perspective for sure.
It's just, I just feel like some people might be like, wow, it seems very simple and there's not chaos to it. No, there can be.
Is. Oh yeah, for sure.
In the best way.
Sure.
And I'll say too that
organized chaos.
Yeah, organized chaos. This cadence though allows you to do multiple things at once. Otherwise you're just tripped up of it's like, man, do I have to like block my entire week to do Sparkle and like I can't do anything else because we forgot about all this stuff. So this cadence like helps us like run in tandem.
And it forces you to know brainstorming is over.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
like
we're moving on.
Now it doesn't mean like in the pitches, there still is time where we're changing stuff around. But the pie in the sky brainstorm is over now. Now the budget is now real.
Yes.
You know, the budget has been set by Creative Check-In number 1, and you're gonna adhere to it. So.
Yeah. So Maddie, what things are there? Any things that jump out at you that between service planning and check-ins that are things that often get missed or things that are important to make sure to be aware of? Because again, some people listening are saying, I am all of those people.
Yeah.
But then there are others that say, no, we have a few that are responsible. And as someone who's managing the project, I also think that's a key. Even if you don't have somebody whose job it is to be a project manager, you need to clarify who is responsible for the tasks to get done. Now, and I don't mean who's responsible for creating everything.
Yes.
Who's responsible to be checking in, to be making sure the pace is being set. It's like, you know, generosity accelerators. I have a number of things that I talk about, but one of my main responsibilities is making sure that we stay on time. You're in this podcast. I will make sure that we don't go 3 hours, you know, I'm not Joe Rogan, you know, and so it's like, but there does need to be somebody who's responsible to making sure that happens. That's not the person creating it. And again, if they are, you better have a really good app or something.
Oh yeah,
for real.
Lots of use of AI. No, I think that's really helpful. I would say we've discovered like coming into those meetings and clarifying during those, like cross-departmentally, like, okay, you're doing this. Like that really is the time to make sure everything's covered. Like, for example, the like TV wall at Apple Valley, we always go back and forth, like, is film doing it? Are we doing it? Who's making the thing for the Apple Valley TV wall? Like, that's just an example of one that could fall into multiple departments. And then I would say too, if you're one of those churches where you're like, no, I'm all of those people, like I think there can be a benefit to that as well, because you really are working with the time that you have versus the collaborating that's necessary. And so we use that space to define, okay, for example, in that pitch, there's ideas that comm had that require film. Like we're like, we want to make these reels or whatever, and we would need film support. And so coming to the Creative Check-In and saying, okay, this is how we need your support. This is how you need ours. And we're going to figure out before we leave today, like if we're moving forward with that or not.
It's like a problem-solving space. In some ways, it's like you're updating.
And eliminating.
But also, updating, eliminating, and problem solving. It's like if someone's like really stuck on something, that's a perfect place. Like the amount of times we've had to work through an opener in those meetings, those are just opener meetings, like, which is the best because that's the right space for it. And now it's like, we're not all just on separate islands, you know?
And too, like in those meeting notes that we've been talking about, and there's different examples throughout the deck that show this, but it's one doc. Everyone can see it. The project manager's taking notes, but I'm not just taking notes for myself. I'm taking them for the ministry, for film, and saying like, film is going to do blank, like comm is going to do blank. And that's not to like blame or anything. It's to create accountability for people, because nobody's going to remember with the number of meetings that we have who said what. And so having the doc as a running list of who's doing what is also super helpful to look back on.
So part of the Creative Check-In too depends on the size of the event, how many you have or how few you have, or you might only have one. It might be in conjunction. Again, you might say, I kind of have to squeeze these 5 into 3 because it's we only got 2 weeks or something. But big conferences that we're putting on are going to have multiple check-ins. Maybe, a smaller event might have one check-in, others again might be condensed in a smaller amount of time. I want to put a pause on that for a second, because we're 3 meetings in, and just to review to people, you have vision brainstorm is kind of the first. Again, you can split these up if you want, but people, they don't have time for 50 meetings.
Combine it.
So
do what you got to do.
Vision and brainstorm. Then we have the pitch of the direction, making sure creatively we're executing on, or we're working on stuff that's actually the right things.
And within budget.
Exactly. And then we're checking in to make sure those tasks are being developed, as well as we're on the same page, that it's staying on vision. I want to pause there before we get to meetings 4 and 5 and talk about the tools because everyone always asks, well, what do you use for this? And what do you use for that? You mentioned Planning Center in terms of how we use service. We use that for kind of our connections ministry as well. But talk about some of the tools you use for design and then talk about some of the tools you use for project management.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I mean, our designers, we are like Adobe designers through and through. So we're a big Illustrator church. I will never be a Photoshop girl. It's not in my blood. Like I'm not wired that way, but some people are, which is really cool. They're like cut different. So we use, I think the main apps that we use would be Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop, and Lightroom are our primary things. I get asked a lot for like inspo, like sources because that comes from a lot. We use Pinterest, Behance. There's this website called savee.it. It's called Save It, but with an extra E. I don't know. It's whatever. But it's a really cool website. So we use that. And then Instagram has like honestly become a huge, like if you're not on Instagram for design, I'm like, oh my gosh, the way my algorithm has changed is so good for River Valley Church because it's like there's so much new ideas between that and TikTok. And it's like I like hate social media, but at the same time, those are like some of our like really big tools to like make sure we stay fresh, you know?
And we have a shared Instagram message.
I was just gonna say
that we
we do.
You can talk about it, Maddie.
No, I was just gonna say, that's our cross collaboration, sending design ideas, and then it's for social ideas as well. But it's literally called Content Ideas.
There's like 30 people.
I was gonna say it's gotta have like 20 people in it.
Yeah.
So,
but it's just, hey, I saw this from an ad or a church or a brand, and I just
send
thought,
it here.
I just thought it was a cool inspiration, and it just always it kind of keeps yourself fresh for looking for those things.
It does.
Keeps your eye.
And then you save it again. If you see something, instead of being like, oh, I should show that to the team, you just send it there.
You just send it.
No, it's so
and
good.
then when we're planning for Sparkle, as an example, like we go back through that thread and we actually pull ideas from it, which is super fun. So
we used to, with the designers, like rhythm I've gotten into is starting to save ideas even before I have the vision. So I already have ideas for Sparkle 2025. I have no idea what the vision is, but it just like keeps you moving. It's like the event is like never over, you know, and you can be stressed by that or you can embrace it and prepare for the next and like be excited for it. I'm like, I just found some really cool stuff that it's like, I don't know if this will work, but if it does, it's like really fun and fresh. And so that keeps you like in a healthy rhythm too, I think. So those are, I mean, we also use like practically Monday.com, but Maddie will talk about that. So the designers use that. So do the filmmakers, so do the project managers. We're getting production and worship in it more and more as much as we can, which is the best. So that's how we like manage our tasks. But
Monday.com is where we live and die and breathe by tasks that come out of a creative check-in and then come back into a creative check-in. So we'll take the notes, myself and then Anna from the film side, and put them into Monday.com from a creative check-in, break them down into different tasks for like literally putting a task in for myself that I don't forget to do, and then also making tasks for design as well. So Monday.com is similar to like Asana or Rike or Basecamp. There's plenty of other like project management systems out there. We've been using Monday.com for a little over almost 4 years now, like 3.5, and it's awesome. Definitely,
it's so wonderful.
It definitely takes some time in the beginning. Like we've done plenty of calls with churches that are like, "Oh, this is so much to set up at the beginning," but we can attest that it
was
is
very
worth
daunting,
it.
and it still is daunting for me.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I use it I don't use it as much as you guys do, but like I understand why it's very helpful.
Why it's helpful.
You know, you can color code. It's great for social calendars.
Yes.
It's great for a lot of different things. And
Status updates on projects.
It's a beautiful UX.
Yeah. And the bigger your team, I would say probably the better it is.
Yeah,
you know, I think if you're a small team, that you might be able to get away with using just like Google Tasks or you know something that even GCal and things like that, where you're not overwhelmed. But when you're talking, okay, I have
cross collaborating.
I have 6 departments that I need to give again for a conference, for example. Well, no, we need these film assets, these social assets, these design assets. You know, these emails need to be sent. There's all sorts of things that are happening all at once. And it really just gives you an idea of, are we making sure that we're up to speed? And then at that point, when you're coming close to a check-in, are you then going back and physically in person checking with some of these people and saying, hey, are we doing good? Or is it mostly just, no, they've got the system down and you don't need to do that?
I would say common design are always cross collaborating. Like that's just the way that our team is set up. I don't think you necessarily have to do it that way. But I don't typically know what film's up to until I'm in the check-in again.
That's
so
a good point. Yeah.
I don't know that that's unique to our team. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but the way that we set the tasks up, the project manager on comm is owning all the design tasks just for clarity. And so then I'm always going back, like the decor mood board example, like I'll put in the task, hey, we have a creative check-in coming up. I need a decor mood board by blank. We'll collaborate on that. And then Annie will say, ready for review. And she's like ready to present it at the creative check-in. But I don't often know what film or worship or production is up to until I'm in that meeting. So,
and I laugh
that's a lot
because,
of trust.
It is a lot of trust, but we have good people, good people to trust.
I was going to say,
it's like, I laugh because it's like, ideally, I feel like it's like, oh, it's like you want to have all your tasks done and there's no cross communication. I just don't think that's healthy and I don't think that's fun. It's like also knowing creatives, we tend to push a little bit. And so I think it's good to like stay in contact with your people.
Sure.
Like in my role, I do talk to film a lot in between and I talk to the project managers like every 4 seconds. Like there's different things that it's like, I think that it's not bad to like talk in between as much as you can, you know? But also if it's a tight timeline and you just got to go through Monday, love it. So, I don't know.
And I think that, there might be people who are in roles at churches who are not really related to this, or people from our church, whatever, they go, oh, wow, I didn't realize how much work goes into some of these events and things. And I do think, we're even having some of those conversations internally too. Okay, what is the opportunity cost? What is the bandwidth cost of some of these events? On paper, it seems great to let's do another thing. Let's do another big thing.
Yeah.
If you can get away with doing an event without pouring a bunch of creative energy into it, more power to you.
Yeah, totally.
But I do think that we're missing a component of creativity, and you're probably going to drive your creatives out if you don't have a opportunity to speak into it. If it is just, hey, we got a worship night coming up and I want it themed based on this verse and go ahead. Well, and then they have all these other tasks to do. It can be daunting and overwhelming versus, no, let's plan this in advance. Let's give some creativity, because ultimately then you're going to get your best work out of your creative people because they have the time to brainstorm. Now, I understand that not everyone has the luxury to just devote time to conferences. And you may say, we don't do any conferences. But again, every church has got Easter. Every church has got Christmas. Most churches have youth camp. And you may say our district does that, but every church has something that they can apply that to. And so once we get that happening, we're checking in, we're making sure things are going the right direction. Now we've got everything turned in. We know we've got the right films. We know we have the right graphics for the most part. And that leads us to meeting number 4. And Maddie, can you talk about that meeting? And then, of course, Annie, that has turned into something that is a must-have.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe we lived without it.
I don't know how we ever did it or didn't do it.
I know, it's only like 3 years new, and it's changed my life. And I do not mean that dramatically.
I think it's even newer than that. I feel like it's even newer than that.
Like 2.5 years.
Yeah. Anyway, so for all of our events now, we do what we call a final media walkthrough, and it should really be called like the pre-final or something, because we end up like looking at everything like again later.
But version 1 out of 2.
Yeah, but it's a media due deadline of 10 days prior, and that can be, it's shorter for smaller events too, but for Sparkle, as the example that we're using, it's 10 days out so that we can look at everything a week prior to when the event starts and make room for edits, should there be any. And that's why we're saying it's like the pre-final, because there ends up being some small edits, which is all good, and that's the point of seeing it. So in that meeting,
or there ends up being a lot of edits, and then you have time to do the
edits. That has happened too.
But most of the time, those edits, like the designers in the room with their Adobe open, rather than I'll get to it later. No, like I'm making these edits now, and then I'll throw it back up on the screen.
And we're going to see the new one. Yeah. So for that meeting, you have all the departments that we've been talking about in the room. They're all getting to see and preview the content that they've been working on for the event prior to the event, which seems like a crazy concept when I think about like how did we never do this? I don't know.
No, but I would say that most churches do not.
Right. And
they don't feel like they have the time.
No, totally.
Or they just don't. They just they do it Sunday morning or Saturday night or the morning of the event.
And this came out of that. Like we had multiple, even just weekend services where we were like, oh, that wasn't the right version that went up or whatever. And so this was born out. Yeah, there was a spelling mistake or that was V2 and there was a V3 you didn't know about or whatever.
This is funny. I want to say that it was Pastor Rob was standing on stage and there was like someone's like stomach awkwardly like where it was hitting on the screen and it was literally like, oh my goodness, this is live streaming right now. Yeah. And there's just an awkward like stomach photo.
I have nightmares of that. Yeah. Like I sweat thinking about that.
So we have a mannequin. What is his name?
Carl.
Yep. We have the mannequin Carl that goes to show like what a person standing on stage would look like. And we've caught now many of them.
Oh my gosh.
But we try to do it as much as possible in the room that it's going to be in.
Yes.
And sometimes with venues that we're renting, we won't be able to do them in advance.
Yeah.
But that has saved us.
I know it has. And I will say too, like, it's so important to do it on the screen that you're going to see. And as much as you can have lighting dialed in, like what is the closest final product you can get? And like we used to do Sparkle in a different venue. So in that situation, we would still test it at our like nicest like wall or projector. And then we would schedule another one for like actually at the venue. So it was like a different timeline, but it's still important, I think, at your church before the event, do like a final media walkthrough.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything, we have a Dropbox folder that everything goes into on that 10 days out or whatever date you find works best for your team. And then the reason it's 10 days out is it gives our production team time to actually build out the show, download the films, get everything ready to go. That way on the media walkthrough day, they're not trying to click through and figure out what goes where. They have it all ready to go. And then for that final media walkthrough, the ministry is also in the room getting to see the content. This isn't the first time they've seen it. We do like background previews. We make sure that they're aware of like what's going to go up on the screen, but they're seeing it all together for the first time, essentially. Yeah. They've probably seen film previews at this point. Yep. They've likely not always seen every part of the opener, but like there's always things that they've seen prior, and this is getting to see all of it together.
Yep.
And I just want to pause again to, I think there are people listening right now and they're thinking, yeah, that's great for River Valley that you have the team, you have the staff and time to devote to this. And I'd acknowledge like, totally. We weren't always there. Like you said, for a time you were our only designer. We didn't have a bunch of project managers. We every church wishes they had more staff.
Yeah.
I think every company feels that way. I mean, it's just, we don't have enough time to do everything we want to do in our heart. But there is a level of excellence that we have a desire to achieve as a church. And I know there's people that are critical. Oh, it's excellence culture. It's not Christ-like culture. Like Jesus never said we have to be excellent. Yeah. We have to be Christ-like. Totally true. But I think you can tie this into our value. And what I'm trying to articulate is when somebody's watching a video about generosity or about life change. We shared some stories at Sparkle a couple years ago about somebody who was coming out of like a life in adult entertainment and you know, like was recovering from that. Yep. And that's a pretty heavy video. Yep. We've shared stories about people with self-harm. You have a spelling error in there, and somebody's mind goes from hearing this testimony to they use the wrong form of your. Now, do I think that derails the whole thing? No, I don't. But it can. Do a color that something gets washed out? I was just messaging about a video we showed this weekend, which was awesome. But I said, I wonder if we should have done subtitles. It was hard to understand, and we went back and forth on that. So those
audio mismatch.
Totally. Is the screen? Is that really the color is weird? So. I'm not saying it's excellence culture, like you have to be perfect, but we've all been there. Oh, the date on that video is wrong. Sorry about that. It just shows a little bit, and then the devil gets in their head, and he's like, if they can't even pay attention to a spelling mistake, or they can't even pay attention to that, then how do you expect them to take care of your life and your soul and your family? Now, that can become unhealthy too.
Totally.
We can acknowledge, hey, we made a spelling mistake. It's not a big deal. Hey, we had the date wrong. It's not a big deal. So I'm not here to say if there's any issues, you are always wrong and it's terrible. But I do think that our heart around this is when you make an event and when you're doing all this hard work, and if it's a conference that people paid a ticket for, or if it's a Easter weekend when we're, for our church, we're going to have tens of thousands of people that are showing up. We want to be intentional about it and show, no, we can make this beautiful.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially for those people in the crowd that have that creative bent or that love grammar and that's a passion of theirs. Like we don't want to give anybody the idea that they just can check out from the message we're trying to share.
Yes.
So that was a detour.
No, it's so good.
I think that's helpful too. I think it goes back to like the intentionality behind like from the moment you walk into a weekend service or an event, like it's creating an atmosphere that allows people to encounter the presence of God. And that goes to what's on the screens as well. And so creating no distractions and things like that can be important.
Sorry.
You're good.
I'd also say that it's like excellence. Like I totally get the like excellence culture and it's like, is this too flashy? We're also just trying to bring our best offering to God, you know? And as a church, it's like, man, I would hope that the staff are doing that. Like if you've hired really creative people, like I hope that they're bringing their offering, you know, like that's what the Lord calls for all of us. And so it's like totally, it's like, as Maddie's saying, it's like anything with the weekend, any detail like that, like, man, like we want to like, we pick colors of it's like, what do we want people to feel like? How can we get people to the Holy Spirit as soon as possible, essentially, you know? And I encourage that for creative teams too. It's like one of my biggest messages will always be, don't just do what's cool, like make your design cool, but make it intentional before it's cool, you know?
Yeah.
So
as we come to a close on this episode, there's one final meeting. And in this scenario, we did the final walkthrough. We made the edits. We made the changes. The event went on. It was an amazing event. The Lord moved. People got saved, or whatever was supposed to happen. You know, or whatever we hope to happen. You know, of course, we don't control it, but we can control what we can control.
Yes. Yeah.
And there hopefully wasn't spelling mistakes. There hopefully wasn't awkward pictures and awkward moments.
Please God.
We did all that, and then our final meeting that we do after the event is our event debrief.
Yes. So the debrief is scheduled anywhere from like the week prior to a few weeks prior, just kind of depending on scheduling. It's never bad to do it right away, but we also see there can be a benefit to like giving people a little bit of breathing room to like have reflected on the event. And the debrief is as simple as getting all those same people in the room that were in the other meetings and asking 4 questions. What was good? What was not so good? What was missing? And what was confusing? And we call the not so good opportunities as well. So if you're looking for a positive spin on that one, you can say opportunities, but we'll use a giant whiteboard in whatever room we're in, and we'll literally just go and write every single idea from every single category, things that the ministry owned, things that creative owned, and it is where we start the process for the next event of So Sparkle 2025. The very first thing we'll do is we'll open up the debrief notes. A couple things for debriefs is it's not a problem solving space.
That's the hardest thing.
I start the meeting
Logan always
every time by reminding everyone it is not a problem solving space, and I do it myself too. It's easy to want to do, but it's really intended to just write down all the ideas so that when we come back next year, we can look back at it. And we take every idea from the whiteboard and then write it all on a doc and have it to look back on. And we always start the meeting too, just for like morale purposes, on a couple of like shout outs to different departments, like things that you don't want to start this meeting on like, here's the thing I've been thinking about for the last 3 weeks that really was not so good about the event. So just, you know, like cultural things, celebrating what went really well, doing that together as a team, starting on the good, then obviously talking about the other necessary categories that we want to do, because we do have excellence in mind and wanting to improve always. But ending on the good, starting with the good is always just like a pro tip.
Just looking at some of this, you know, and again, these are our real notes, real debrief, but like Sparkle, you know, it's an event. We do 2 conferences. We have thousands of women that come to that. It's one of the biggest things that we do. But it's like, hey, good. You know, we had people that knew what they were doing.
Praise God.
The MCs did a great job. Renee
no bathroom lines.
Yeah, no bathroom lines. Decor felt great. You know, our altar time in Sparkle 1 was just incredible. You know, we had great men that were serving. The humor bit went off really well, and the ladies really enjoyed that, you know, the overall brand. And then, okay, what are some not so good? It's like, okay, there was Ableton, there's obviously a story around that. Like lunch seating options were limited. You know, we had a ton of edits this year. Maybe we could have, you know, done some more check-ins. The logistics for our silent disco, you know, it's like, obviously people didn't know what was happening. And then missing, like, and I think the difference between like not so good, missing, and confusing. Not so good is it wasn't lack of clarity. It just it just didn't work.
It just didn't.
It just didn't work.
Just be honest that something was not quite
Whereas
right.
missing was more like we didn't even
think about it.
We didn't even think about it.
Yes.
Like, oh, that would have been great. We could have done something at the end to close it out better, or we could have branded that space better. And then confusing, like maybe that's something that people. There wasn't necessarily agreement on, but okay, who needed to be wear what badge? That happens at conference every year.
Yeah.
Every single year.
Who grabbed the volunteer badges? You're a staff member. You're not supposed to grab that.
We're still working on that.
Yeah, and like the lines for something or the motion graphics felt a little weird. That So I just think it's helpful. And again, I'm sharing some of these ideas just to spur people. Okay, this is what that means. It's not to say, like, we're going to compare all of our good ideas versus all of our bad ideas.
Not at all.
It's no, we're just trying to debrief. And honestly, like in the meeting that goes back into our brainstorm meeting, it's helpful to, like one year at conference, it was like, we forgot to put recycling bins in that area.
Yeah.
And we added it to the list. But we would have never remembered that if we didn't take the notes. So I want to close this out because it's been long and there's a lot to process. Any last thoughts that you would say, okay, in these meetings, in this process, hopefully this is a helpful tool for people. Take what works for you.
Totally.
Don't use the stuff that doesn't. But anything else you'd say, can't miss that, or make sure not to forget.
I have one thing.
Okay,
I would just say, I think the intent behind all of this is you're playing to people's strengths. And with creatives, especially, like for me, I love taking notes. I love being the organized person that hands the baton. And so that's my strength. And I don't have to rely on everyone else to have that same strength, where Annie has different strengths and creative abilities that I don't have. And so this system is playing to people's strengths and allowing creatives to be creative and organized people to move things forward without letting one or the other fall.
Yeah, that's
Is
so
what
good.
I would say.
No, and I would echo that of like, I've met some creatives and I am a creative like through and through. That's who I am. So I say this with like testifying and also an encouragement to my creative friends of it's like in my unhealthy creative side, like there were seasons where I was not like a healthy team member here. And I would be like very upset if we didn't do the process my way. And it's like, well, it takes this much time and things like that. And I testify as like now, like having moved through different roles here, that it's like, no, this system does work. And if it's not this system, a system does work. And it is a bigger loss for you to have your ideal system and not be unified with the rest of the team
that's good.
than it is to like, you know what I mean?
your
I don't know.
idea.
And I say that out of love because I've been that person and I'm so much happier this way. Like it's just so much more fun. So I would say that. And then the last thing I'd say about the debrief is that's not a place to have hard conversations. That's a place to talk objectively. That's a place to be like, this is objectively what I saw. If you're going to have a hard conversation with another team or a one-on-one, do that as a sidebar.
Yes.
Like keep the debrief like as healthy as you can. And say this, if you're giving feedback, like we give feedback to the ministry and the ministry gives feedback to creative, say it with love. Like feedback does not have to be harsh.
No.
You can give good direct feedback without being a jerk. And like, if you don't know how to do that, it's all good. Just Google it. There's so many resources.
How to not be a jerk.
Way. Literally, how to give good feedback.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that'll be our next episode is how to give good feedback and not be a jerk.
For real. I like it.
But this has been very helpful, and we'll throw things on the screen as people were watching it. They'll be able to see those things. But thank you so much for running this through. Again, there's so much more that we could get into. But the 5 meetings you must have to make whatever the title of this episode is happen.
Right.
And thank you for sharing with us and being a gift. And I know you help a lot of network churches all the time process through some things. And so until next time, Annie, Maddie, appreciate it.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Logan.